Well, hello and welcome, everybody, to Campion College's 38th Annual Nash Memorial Lecture. Before we start our proceedings tonight, I would just like to acknowledge that Campion College is located on Treaty 4 land and the ancestral homeland of the Métis. My name is Dr. Jillian Ramsey. I'm an assistant professor of classics here at Campion College, and I've been serving on this year's Nash Lecture Committee. And as a member of the committee and as a member of the faculty of Campion College, it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight and also to MC the proceedings. The Nash Memorial Lecture series was founded in 1979 to honor the first president of Campion College at the University of Regina, Father Peter Nash. The lectures are presented annually by people who have distinguished themselves in the areas fostered by the Father Nash: humanities, social and natural sciences, and the fine arts. To begin the lecture, I'd actually like to call on my colleague, Dr. Catherine Arbuthnot, who's a professor of psychology, to introduce our speaker. She has been involved in getting the sustainability certificate up and running at the Faculty of Arts and continues to facilitate that with colleagues at Luther College. So, Dr. Arbuthnot.
I'm not used to using this in this room. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Father Greg Kennedy, who will be giving us our exciting main event tonight. And I'll keep this brief so we can get to that. But I always think it's useful in an introduction to have some sense of the contexts of a speaker's life so that we can enrich our own experience by taking the perspective of what are the contexts in which some of these thoughts have been developed. So our speaker is a multi-talented, multi-passioned man, so I can't possibly tell you about all of his contexts in the time I want to take, but I want to tell you about 3 of his callings in particular. First, he's a philosopher, and in addition, just a very talented scholar. He has 5 degrees, 3 of them in philosophy, obtained across Canada, Toronto, Edmonton, and Ottawa. He's got a book published. His book, The Ontology of Trash, I believe, was based on your dissertation work, is a philosophical exploration of what it means to be disposable and what are some of the consequences of designing our culture around disposability and the implications it has for our relationship with our physical selves and our physical world and that sort of thing. And as a conservation psychologist, I'm hoping we hear little resonances of that in some of the talk tonight. His other degrees are in divinity and theology, so I'm sure he has more degrees than pretty much anybody else here in his short time. So a very deep and rich scholarship. The second calling is he's a Jesuit. He was ordained in 2015. He works as an Ignatian spiritual advisor, and so I suspect we're going to hear about ecology and technology and spirituality through the Ignatian lenses. So we'll hear it and be invited to think about and reflect on these ideas with excellence and thinking about holistic care for each other and for our world. So that's the second one of his callings I wanted to mention. And the third is he's an organic farmer. He has done organic farming in many countries around the world for several years. He currently lives and works at the Ignatian Jesuit Center in Guelph, Ontario, which runs a very rich community-based organic farm, which I know because my kids have lived there for quite a while. So I have taken advantage of the lovely produce produced by this organic farm. And it nourishes the citizens of Guelph, Ontario, and it also nourishes them with its landscape. It's some of my research. I know that contact with the natural world improves our health in pretty much any way you can think about it. But one of the ways that you might be interested in, Greg, is that it increases our transcendent emotions. So the feelings of awe and wonder, feeling we're part of something larger, and just those experiences also then have a positive virtuous cycle. So it's got some direct relationship to our own spirituality and our sense of that. And so Guelph is the spiritual center, Jesuit center, is offering the beautiful landscape of their grounds to the citizens of Guelph as well. So those are the three of his callings, among many others that I wanted to talk about: the philosopher, a Jesuit, and an organic farmer. So those are the lenses that we'll hear among, as I say, others, as we listen to his exploration of technology, ecology, spirituality, and connection, I presume, from the indifference in your title. So help me to welcome Dr. Greg Kennedy.
Many thanks. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation to speak here. And thank you for that very, very generous introduction. What was not mentioned in that very generous introduction is that I am chronically long-winded. And so I'm going to ask all of you a favor. And this is a favor for your benefit and for my benefit. You want to get home before 12 o'clock, and I do not want to make a room full of bored enemies on my very first trip to Regina. So if you have a cell phone, please pull it out, and we're going to set a timer. 45 minutes, my friends. 45 minutes. And because if I just set mine, it'll go off and I can talk on through it. But let's do this all at once. So it all goes off, it all vibrates at the same time. Has some seismic reaction, maybe we'll get a 2 or 3 on the Richter scale, and that'll stop me in my tracks. So what do you think? Okay, we're going to count down. Everyone got it ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Excellent. Okay, before you put these things away, I want to do a little experiment on the cell phone. I want to do a little phenomenology of the cell phone. Phenomenology was a philosophical discipline introduced by Husserl in the early 20th century, and it's basically the study of phenomena, or the semantics of an object. What does an object mean? And so we have to look at our relationships with the object, and so what does the cell phone mean? So let's try to, you might want to hold it and touch it. In fact, one study says that the average cell phone user touches their cell phone 2,416 times a day. And those who are a little more extreme, that's 5,400 times a day. So let's just touch it. Let's smell it. Let's feel it in our hands. And I'm going to ask you a few questions related to this. And if you don't have one in your hands, maybe you can look on with your friend. Most people have cell phones. I think it's in Canada, about 86% of people have smartphones, around that. So let's ask a few questions, especially about this thing that is so dear to us, and that's almost always on our person. Again, the average teenager, I don't want to pepper you with facts too much, these statistics, but some are telling. The average teenager and 20-something person 63 of them go to bed with their cell phone. They say 20% of those 20-something people use their cell phone while having sex. I'm sure none of those are Campion students, but this being a good Jesuit university, of course. But let's go on to a few questions. What 3 words would you use to describe your cell phone? 3 words to describe your cell phone. Annoying. Amen. Oh, I don't want to reveal my bias. I'm sorry. Okay. Addictive. Useful. Good. Okay, let's go on to another one. 3 words, or whatever number of words, to describe how you feel when you use it. Independent? Dependent? Okay, great. There was exhausted? Absorbed. Okay. Frustrated? Obligated? Is that good or bad? Okay, good. I want to, hopefully at least someone gets some sort of good experience of what are we doing with these things. Okay, what are a few words? What are your expectations of this? What do you expect of your cell phone? Information? Communication? Yes, you can do just about anything. I tune my guitar with this thing. Yeah. What else? Connection. Connection is a word we'll hear a lot this evening. Thank you. All right. I better keep going. Okay, one last question, and then we'll go. How would you feel if you lost it? Anxious? Frustrated? Free? Yeah, really? I was talking to someone just the other day, and they said they sometimes suffer asthma, and if they had left the house without their asthma thing, they would feel very nervous. And this happened to this person. He forgot his cell phone, and he had that same kind of nervous physical reaction because he forgot his cell phone at home. Okay, very good. We could spend all night asking questions. I want to shift this to expand our phenomenology of the cell phone. How does it work? How could you describe in one sentence how this thing works? Magic. Amen. This, my friends, there's no coincidence that this is a black thing. This is a total black box for me. I don't understand how the touchscreen works. I don't understand how so much little information can come in this. I don't understand a darn doodle about this thing. Okay, what's it made of? Plastic and glass. And anything else? A little bit of metal? Any blood minerals in there? Cobalt, gold. Okay, very good. What are the origin of these minerals, these materials, these glass and all this? Do we know where it comes from? Pardon me? Some of it from China? Earth? Earth, where exactly? Does anyone know? Someone knows. Somewhere in Africa. Yeah, some of the gold might come from South America. I just spent 2 years in Colombia, where all the rivers are being ripped up and filled with mercury because of the gold production. Who are the people that made it? People in China. Yeah. And what happens when you get a new one, when you toss it out? Who recycles it? Stack them in your junk drawer. Who knows? They send them back to China. And China, in fact, is starting to reject all of our garbage because they don't want it anymore. And so, in fact, most of our plastics that we recycle go to China, and they don't want it anymore. So we're stockpiling our plastics because we don't know how to recycle it ourselves. Anyway, before we get off onto China, I just wanted to start with those questions, this phenomenology, because, in fact, in many ways, we're very attached to this thing. It's like our closest friend. We tell it all our secrets. We sleep with it. It's very, very close. And yet, on the other hand, it's a complete stranger. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it works. If I have a relationship with someone, it's a very close relationship, I want to know who their parents were, what they do for a living, just to get to know. So in one way, we're very attached to these things and completely indifferent about how they work, where they come from, and what their impact is. So this kind of paradox, this inconsistency, this perhaps contradiction is what I want to explore tonight. Because contradictions are very important to philosophers. If you have a contradiction and you can spot a contradiction in someone's argument, you've got them in a stranglehold. It's the fatal flaw of any argument, is a contradiction. Also, as a spiritual director, so I'm a spiritual director these days, less of a philosopher, more a spiritual director. So I might actually be more of a spiritual director tonight for you, because I'm a bit of a one-trick pony. I can only do one thing. I'm not very good at multitasking, so my job being a spiritual director, I'm going to be more directing spiritually tonight. Just be thankful that I'm not a psychoanalyst. So as a spiritual director, we're looking for what Ignatius would call, Ignatius was the saint who started the Jesuits. I won't get into that. But interior movements, looking at how we are moved inside. And basically there are two directions where we can be moved. We can be moved into more self-centeredness, to more egoism, into more selfishness, or the exact opposite. We can be moved into more generosity with an outward force, looking towards others, inclusivity or exclusivity, joy versus fear, love versus hate. These are the movements that we look at as spiritual directors. And it tells a lot about a person. When these things collide, when our deepest desires collide, there's energy there. And as a spiritual director, you look at that and you say, okay, how is the divine working? And so when I hear some of these inconsistencies that we have with our own relationship to the cell phone perhaps being paradigmatic or emblematic of other technologies, what's going on there, I ask? And especially when things like this happen, when I still read the newspaper because my Jesuit community gets it, and I want to share with you just this little article that I found, January 23rd, 2018, reprinted in the Toronto Star from the Washington Post. Headline saying, "Teens who spend less time with screens are happier, study finds." In recent months, Silicon Valley executives have been speaking out about the purposely addictive designs of smartphones and social media, which make them hard to put down for anyone, but particularly teenagers. Now, a new report puts numbers to the warnings, tying a sudden and large drop in adolescents' happiness with the proliferation of smartphones, and finding that the more hours a day teens spend in front of screens, the less satisfied they are. The report, which is called Decreases in Psychological Well-Being Among American Adolescents After 2012, and links to smart screen time during the rise of smartphone technology, long title, almost as long as mine, was published Monday in the journal Emotion, using a large U.S. survey of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, conducted annually by the University of Michigan. After rising since the early 1990s, adolescent self-esteem, life satisfaction, and happiness plunged after 2012, the year smartphone ownership reached the 50% mark in the United States, says the report. It also found that adolescent psychological well-being decreased the more hours a week they spent on screens, including the internet, social media, texting, gaming, and video chats. The findings jibe with earlier studies linking frequent screen use to teenage depression and anxiety. So my spidey senses, my spiritual director's spidey senses go ballistic when I hear things like that. Because we're not forced to use cell phones. It's all voluntary. And in fact, it's all in order to be connected, as someone said up there. That's the whole point of this. And yet, it's driving people depressed. It's making people depressed, and especially the young people. I take very seriously the words of Jesus when he says, "I've come to give you life and life abundantly," which means not just, ho-hum, get through, survival, but life. joy, happiness, community, abundance. And when I hear things like this, I get nervous. I get afraid. That's not happening. And for some sort of kind of crazy reason. Because the whole reason that we have these devices is to free us, in a sense, to help us. And when they're not doing that, something is amiss. We were built for happiness. This has been the philosophical tradition since Aristotle, that everything we do, every decision we make in order to be happy. Quite often we make the wrong decisions because we don't know what's going to make us happy, unfortunately. But if we don't have freedom, we're certainly not going to be happy. Freedom is fundamental to any kind of happiness. And our attachment to these things, I think, is robbing us from happiness and some of that freedom. 50% of teenagers claim that they're addicted to their cell phones. Their parents, about 80% of their parents say their teenagers are addicted to cell phones. So there's a discrepancy there, of course. But Ignatius thought that freedom was very, very important. And he developed this whole thing called the spiritual exercises, an intense period of prayer, an intense method of prayer, in order to make decisions without any disordered attachments. So we have to ask ourselves, are we disorderly attached to these devices? And not just the cell phone, but any kind of technology. I think we have to come at this with a bit of humor, because otherwise we'd get very depressed ourselves. You've heard of birding, right? Birding are bird watchers who go out and they look at the plumage and they look at the mating habits. Any birders out there? Any birders? All right. It's a wonderful thing. Now, the bird population is decreasing. Apparently, over the last 20 years, there's been a decrease in about 1 billion birds in Canada, and all kinds of species are going extinct. I won't get into that, but there is another way to do this. You can not be a birder, but an absurder. You can become a watcher of absurdities, and the world is rife with absurdities, and so we'll never run out of absurdities in the modern world. And it gives us a little humor and to be able to kind of navigate and tolerate some of this stuff. I first became an absurder in Toronto when I was doing my undergrad. The campus of U of T abuts Yorkville. Yorkville is a very shishy part of Toronto where all the Gucci's and the Rolex and the Tiffany stores are. So I would walk down Bloor Street, and my favorite thing to do was to be an absurder. So my favorite spot was on Bloor Street, and on the second level was Gold's Gym, and it was full 2-story glass in this high-rise. And so you see these people diligently, very earnestly working out on the stair climber, on the stationary bikes and all this. And then in between the floors, you watch them on the escalator, going up and back, up and down, up and down, up and down. I thought, beautiful. Isn't that so beautiful? Some more, now where I live on an organic farm, and we have trails open to the public, and people bring their dogs. And people feel compelled, I guess, out of courtesy, to poop and stoop and scoop. But often they'll put the dog poo in a bag and leave the bag, as if somehow this makes it all better. So not only is it never going to decompose, but it's still there. So it's even more of an eyesore. So another absurdity. And perhaps my favorite is what I would call the Russian doll climate catastrophe. So maybe this doesn't happen in Regina or in Saskatchewan. In Toronto and in Ontario, it happens all the time. It's a blazing summer day. You walk into the office. It's frigid cold. You just walked into Baffin Island. Then you open the door to someone's office, and they've got a space heater, and pump cranked up to the full because they're freezing. And then inside by the space heater, there's a little bar fridge to keep their Coke cold. And you think, how much energy is being used in this whole system, right? What's going on here? I don't want to disgrace any Jesuits, but I'll give you a little tip, a little in on the Jesuits, a little scandal. Jesuits are always involved in scandal, but I've lived in several Jesuit communities, and sometimes there are more cooling devices, more fridges and freezers than there are members of the community. Often, but you didn't hear it from me. So, if we're going to be absurders and relish a bit of these absurdities of modern life, we also have to come down to earth and say, what does this mean for us to be living here? And as a spiritual being, Teilhard de Chardin, a great Jesuit, said, I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Beautiful words. So what does spirituality mean, then? And I think it was said, and I'm more and more convinced of this, it was said up there, connection. Spirituality is to be connected. And I think that sums it up very, very beautifully. Yoga, which is the great spiritual discipline, when you practice yoga, you can do this. Yoga literally comes from the Sanskrit, the word yoga literally comes from the Sanskrit word meaning yoke, to unite, to connect. So our whole being longs to connect. And our whole being longs for this mystical connection with the entire world. And mysticism is not kind of an esoteric discipline in order to decode or decipher the mystery. Mysticism is really dwelling inside the mystery. And that's our job, I think. That's all our jobs, to live inside the mystery of creation, which is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Let me just read you just a short quote from Laudato Si, which is Pope Francis's great ecological treatise, his encyclical. The universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. The ideal is not only to pass from the exterior to the interior, to discover the action of God in the soul, but also to discover God in all things. St. Bonaventure teaches us that contemplation deepens the more we feel the working of God's grace within our hearts, and the better we learn to encounter God in creatures outside of ourselves. So to be amazed, as Catherine was saying, to be amazed is our birthright, in a sense, and is what fulfills us. And so that could very well be to be amazed with these things. I think we ought to be amazed by these things. These things are totally amazing. They're baffling, but they're amazing. But so often we're not amazed by them. If the downloads takes 30 seconds, I get all upset. Never mind that it's crunching billions upon billions of bits and bytes and whatever it's doing, and is tapping into all across the world, I get upset. I've lost the marvel. I've lost the wonder. And that's very, very dangerous. But often, these things almost impede our wonder. These little flat screens, or big flat screens, often impede our wonder. And that's where the danger comes in. Losing our wonder. Losing our amazement. The great mystic Rumi, Sufi mystic, said a good gauge of spiritual health is to write down 3 things you most want. You can even think it in your mind now. 3 things you most want, your deepest desires. And then he says, if they differ in any way, you are in trouble. So purity of heart is to will one thing, said Kierkegaard. Now, what do we really want is the question. Sure, we want connected. We want to be connected with each other. We want that deeply. But also, it's a bit risky. It's a bit troublesome. It takes your time. So we don't totally want it at the same time. Yes, we want it, and yes, we don't. We want our cake, and we want to eat it too. And we want to look really good and stay skinny. And we want to make other people jealous of our bodies. But we also want them to like our photos when we post them on Facebook. What do we really want? The purity of heart is to will one thing. So absurdity. The more connected we are, it seems, virtually, the more connected virtually we are, the more lonely we are, it seems, which is tragic and absurd and funny in the same way. So on a lonely planet, I've called this technological living on a lonely planet because there's increased loneliness. Everywhere you look, there's increased loneliness. The New York Times says that since the 1980s, the percentage of American adults who say they're lonely has doubled from 20 to 40% since the 1980s. And they say isolation is a mortality risk comparable to smoking. So if you're isolated, it's like you're smoking a pack a day. And it's even worse for you than obesity in terms of your overall health. So all that comes from individualism in our culture. We have the breakdown of family ties, the normalization of nuclear families, less extended families. We have seniors' homes, putting people away. It says rates of severe, this is the Canadian National Seniors Council did a survey and says the rates of severe loneliness for older people residing in care homes is estimated to be double of those who live in community dwellings. 44% of seniors in residential care have been diagnosed with depression or show symptoms of depression without diagnosis. This was news to me. Senior men over the age of 80 also hold the highest suicide rates of all groups in Canada. So people are being shunted aside because there's loneliness. There's great, great loneliness. Unprecedented mobility is also contributing to our loneliness. We can go anywhere we want, anytime we want, and we're never here. Jesuits are the worst for this. We're placed all over. Poor John is getting shipped to Montreal. So, I was in Colombia. I spent climbing. Just as kind of to relativize this, I was in Colombia. I spent time there, and the first Christmas I spent there, I went out into a little village of sugarcane producers, and I'd go visit the people in their homes. There may be 70 people lived in this little village, and I was talking to one man in my broken Spanish, and he says he had these big wide eyes. He said, "I've never met anyone like you," and I felt so good. I thought, "Oh, this man has never met anyone so intelligent, so handsome, so spiritually alive." And then talking to him more, I realized he's never met a gringo. He's never met anyone who's not from Colombia. And this was normal for them. And this was probably normal for most people up until very, very recently, to the advent of the jet plane. So this mobility, which is great, also makes us lonely because we're not here. We're everywhere but here. Finally, well, not quite finally, but the extinction of languages and cultures, again, increases our loneliness. According to the UN, as many as half of the world's 7,000 languages are expected to be extinct by the end of this century. So there are about 7,000 languages in existence now. By the end of the century, they think there will only be 3,500. So more and more loneliness. And perhaps the biggest loneliness comes, or the indicator comes from a study done by the World Wildlife Fund and the London Zoological Society. I'm 43 years old. And in my lifetime, the population of wild species, not wild species, but wild animals, so not species, but animals, the sum total of animals has gone down 40 to 50%. Wild animals. 40 to 50% less animals, wild animals on this planet than the day I was born. Talk about lonely. Talk about lonely. There is a Harvard professor named, very famous, E.O. Wilson, who has coined a term called biophilia. And he describes it as the urge to affiliate with other forms of life. We've evolved over billions of years, well, millions of years, with other forms of life. We have this deep instinctual desire to commune with other animals. That's why we love our dogs so much, our cats. But even before that, even before domestication, we're wild animals. And to think of a world devoid of animals is to think of a lonely planet. So we're more lonely than ever in our mass society. Thankfully, you folks live in Regina, which is much nicer than Toronto, which is just a huge mob scene. Luckily, I live in Guelph, which is not. I don't want to offend anyone who's from Toronto, but we live in a lonely planet. But I think we have to take that very literally. I think that even the greater loneliness is the planet itself. I think the planet is terribly lonely. Terribly lonely for us, because we're turning our backs on the planet. And I think the planet is weeping and terribly lonely for us. I'm a great fan of comics. So let me show you one comic. If I can get this working. Here we go. Okay, here we are. This is Zitz. I don't know if you know Zitz. Wonderful, wonderful comic. And it's always about the family. Can everyone see that? Want me to read it out? Jeremy, can we talk? Jeremy's the teenager. Sure, he's got his headphones on. I need your undivided attention. Okay, takes out his earbuds, flips down the laptop, powers off his cell phone, clicks off the television, go. And his mother's euphoric. So that's what it feels like, to have his undivided attention. And her eyes are, she's in ecstasy here. And he says, make it snappy, the room is starting to spin. I think that woman, that mother, is Mother Earth. Longing for our attention. Longing for our attention. Wanting that euphoria to say, listen, I'm your mother. Be with me. And we just keep saying, well, I can't. My head is starting to spin. Get me out of this nature stuff. So I think we're actually, the earth and us, Mother Earth and us, and we are suffering together in direct proportion. And in fact, this goes along with studies that have been done by primatologists, primarily this primatologist named Frans de Waal, a wonderful man who's written many books on this. Perhaps the best one that I've looked at, The Age of Empathy, he calls it, Nature's Lessons for a Kinder Society. So he's a primatologist based in the United States in Atlanta. And he shows how empathy begins with emotional contagion. So not just humans and not just apes, but many other animals, when they see an animal in distress, they too become distressed. That's emotional contagion. And out of that comes empathy. And out of that comes compassion and sympathy. And he says this, there have been studies done that show even mice have this empathy and this emotional contagion. He says, the mice showed pain contagion, that is, the sight of another in pain intensified their pain response. The mice seemed sensitized to pain in general, any pain. So even if it was not a pain of a mouse known to it, it would be sensitized to pain. So I think the earth sees our pain, our disconnect. We see the earth's pain, which is totally apparent. I mean, I could trot off all kinds of facts for you, and one of them is that 40 to 50% of less animals on the world. Another one, I'll just give you these two because they're sufficient. Scientists say that there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. More plastic than fish. Who likes Captain Heinlein plastic? So there's a negative feedback loop that's happening. The earth sees our loneliness, our pain, it becomes pained. We see its pain, and we're just cycling. So how do we stop this cycle? I want to introduce you to another wonderful intellectual named Richard Louv, who in 2005 wrote a seminal book, very, very important, called The Last Child in the Woods. And in this book, he coins the term nature deficit disorder. And so when kids don't spend enough time in nature, playing in trees and in the mud, they're much more prone to ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. So this is all from not spending enough time in the woods. The American Psychological Association has recently, in 2015, I believe, acknowledged eco-anxiety as a syndrome. So people are becoming totally distressed, not having children, because they don't want children raised in the age of climate change. Among the symptoms, trauma and shock, post-traumatic stress disorder, compounded stress, strains on social relationships, depression and anxiety, suicide, substance abuse, aggression and violence, loss of autonomy and control, loss of personal and occupational identity, feelings of helplessness, fear, and fatalism. This is what the American Psychological Association, which are no flaming green tree huggers, are saying about eco-anxiety. So while we are facing and suffering from a nature deficit disorder, I think nature is suffering from a human deficit disorder, that we're not out in the woods enough. And it's very lonely because we have evolved on this earth. Some environmentalists think that we're the Black Plague and that nature would be much better off without us. But we're nature's daughters and sons. How could she be better off without us? I've done many spiritual directions with parents who've been treated awfully by their children, and all they want is reconciliation. They don't want revenge. They don't want to be proven right. They want to be able to hug their children and see their grandchildren. So perhaps this attention that this mother so longed for and was so happy to get is what we have to give. Attention, attention, attention. And the problem is that this desire to be connected, which is spirituality, gets thwarted, I think, the more virtual we become. Because if our capacity for empathy is this instinctual bodily reaction, when we see pain, that we immediately feel pain, and Duvall really wants to say that this is not an intellectual thing. Empathy is not that we think what, I look at you, and I see you grimace, and I think, oh, I had once grimaced, and so it's an immediate body-to-body thing. It circumvents all kinds of rationalization. So it's the body that's so important. And the more virtual we become, the less foundation we have for empathy and for compassion. So the very basis of our sociability, which are our bodies, and our proximity to others, becomes eroded. He writes this: seeing another's emotions arouses our own emotions. And from there we go on constructing a more advanced understanding of the other situation. Bodily connection comes first. Understanding follows. Then he goes on to cite this very interesting kind of proof. He says, working with Parkinson's patients, a speech therapist noted that if in a group of, say, 40 patients, and if in this group 5 showed facial rigidity because they're Parkinson's disease, all others would stay away from them. If they talked to them at all, it was just to get a simple yes or no answer. And if they wanted to know how they felt, so these other patients that did have facial mobility, if they wanted to know how these people who couldn't show facial emotion, they would speak to one of their companions, to one of their friends, to ask them, how is this person? Even though this person could perfectly well speak for themselves. So he concludes that empathy needs a face. With impoverished facial expressions come impoverished empathetic understanding and a bland interaction devoid of the bodily echoing that humans constantly engage in. When we try to talk to a stone-faced person, we fall into an emotional black hole. So how about when we talk to this two-dimensional, we can sometimes, if you have FaceTime, you can see faces, but somehow it's not quite the same. He goes on to say, comforting body contact is part of our mammalian biology. It's part of our biology. Going back to maternal nursing, holding and carrying, which is why we both seek it and give it under stressful circumstances. We all know, I think anecdotally, hopefully we haven't been on the receiving end of kind of rabid emails and vitriolic texts and all these Common courtesy seems to go out the window, doesn't it, in the virtual world? And we can be very, very mean, extremely mean, when we disembody. And so the absolute essential importance of staying in our bodies. And this is, I think, the genius of Christianity. I don't want to preach, but that God became human, took on a body, so that we could be friends with this God. And this God could understand our pain and have this same kind of emotional contagion. And we could have the same emotional contagion with a God who is like us. The Christian God is the perfect God for our biology, completely matches our biology. So the more we kind of put our desire to be connected in this, I think, the more disconnected we become, the more detached we become from other people. And that's not necessary, but often. And so we end up looking for love in all the wrong places, because this deep, deep desire to be connected sends us to this, which frustrates our deepest desire to be connected. And it ends up kind of spinning out, and again, I don't want to be preachy or priestly, but that's what I am. I am what I am, says Popeye and Yahweh, so you're going to get it. It becomes a kind of idolatry. And idolatry was the first commandment. I know, do not put other gods before me. But I want to cleanse that of all its moral implications and just focus on the practical implications of that, the prudential implications. That really, idolatry is simply putting your hope into something that cannot fulfill it. Putting your hope into something that cannot fulfill your hope is idolatry. And we hear that, if you read Psalm 135, it comes out loud and clear. This is Psalm 135. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. And there is no breath in their mouths. Those who make them and all who trust them shall become like them. So technological living detaches us from our bodies, that very substance, the very basis of our sociability, of our empathy, or our compassion. And we end up becoming kind of flat, like this. Indifferent. Solo le pido a Dios, que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la resuelta muerte no me encuentre, vacío y solo sin haber hecho lo suficiente. Anyone know that song? Made famous by Mercedes Sosa, the great Argentinian activist. She didn't write it, but she made it famous. Only this I ask of God, that I be not indifferent to pain, that dry death not find me, empty and alone without having helped enough. Solo le pido a Dios, que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la resuelta muerte no me encuentre vacío y solo sin haber hecho lo suficiente. So our technological idolatry, we could blame it on our devices, but it's not really their fault. They're just simply doing what they're designed to do. One of my favorite philosophers of technology, Albert Borgman, who's a student of Heidegger, Martin Heidegger, he teaches in University of Montana, says that the essence of all technology is what he calls the paradigm, the device paradigm. And so these things are designed to disburden us, to liberate us. And so they come out of this whole Enlightenment movement of liberation, which is great, trying to keep us free. So how they work is they take something very complicated and they reduce it to a certain feature, and they make that available. They take a thing, they make it a consumable good, and they make it available. And how do they make it available? He says, when they're rendered safe, easy, ubiquitous, and instantaneous. So his famous example is the going from the hearth in a house where you make your fire to a central heating unit. So a hearth is pretty, you got to know how to make a fire. It's not very convenient. You got to huddle around this stupid thing, because if you're away from it, you're going to be cold. It's not very safe. There are all kinds of chimney fires that could happen. And it's not very instantaneous. If you ever made it's not to flip a switch. You got to build it up, and you got to stoke it, and you got to blow it, and all this kind of stuff. So when you look at the central heating system, it's the exact opposite. You flip the switch. It's very safe. It's easy. It's not going to explode, usually. It diffuses your heat very comfortably through your house, and it's instantaneous. So these are good things. But is something lost in that? So what did the hearth mean? The hearth was the gathering place for the family. They told stories around it. Do you ever find yourself in the basement around the furnace? I don't think so. Now, all our technological devices work this way. My favorite example is the styrofoam cup or the paper cup. It's very safe. It's easy. It's safe because you're not going to get somebody else's germs. I love this. Disposable cups are a fairly recent invention. They kind of came about in the early 20th century, and they were first started in train stations. People used to there used to be the common cup. So there would be like a fountain, and there'd be this cup on a chain, and I would take it. Then John would take it, and we'd all drink from this common cup, and that's how it worked. Perhaps not the safest, but when they introduced cups, disposable cups, people started smashing the machines because they were charging people for the cups, and they were starting to smash the machines because they were angry that they couldn't just have their cup. So I'll just say that some things perhaps get lost in this commodity, in this device paradigm, because some things need length of time. Some things need to be risky. Some things need effort and care. Some things need to be localized in a specific place. They need to be slow going. Again, think of a good conversation. It's not instantaneous. It's not all that safe because you have to be vulnerable. Every good conversation requires a bit of vulnerability. Otherwise, it's not a good conversation. It's not always easy because you have to listen. You have to put aside your own prejudice. And it's not ubiquitous. You have to be there. You and I have to be there to have a good conversation. Now, when we text, it's very easy. It's very instantaneous. It's very safe, unless you get all kinds of rabid responses. And so, while this offers us certain connectivity, it's deconnecting us on, I think, perhaps a deeper level. So if we were going to allow us to have our faces, we have to say, how do we use this technology in order to enhance our empathy and our compassion and not detract from it? Because technology also has this inherent tendency to hide things. It hides the consequences of its actions. We're all sitting here enjoying light and warmth. All right, give me 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. So light, one more story, just to show you this, and then we'll end. My sister, one Christmas, I've always struggled with Christmas. It's a bit consumeristic. So one Christmas I thought, I'm going to make everything for my family. So I thought I poured all my creative juices into this, and I made my sister this thing of birch bark, and I thought it was beautiful. So here we are in a sea of wrapping paper all over the place, and I give her this thing, unwrapped, of course, and she looks at it and she says, "I hope you didn't hurt a tree to make this." And it was genuine. She hoped I didn't strip this birch bark from a tree. Never mind that she didn't know that, like I said, we're knee-deep in wrapping paper. She never thought that might come from a tree, which it does, my friends. So the tendency of technology to hide itself, to hide its consequences, is something that we also have to be very cognizant of. So I could talk, as you know, much more, but perhaps I can leave you with this. I don't have any magical answers. I'm a spiritual director. I try to understand what's going on in people's lives. I used to think that maybe we have to detach ourselves from our attachment, but I'm not quite sure that's true. I'm starting to think perhaps the best way that we can deal and interact with technology is the catch and release system. Any fishers out there? I know Father Jeff is a fisher. Catch and release. Sometimes it's fun to go fishing. And it's good you're out there and you're doing things. Sometimes it's fun and it's good to be on your computer and to watch a good movie and to have a good conversation, if you can, on this thing. But you release it. So you get reeled in, you get hooked, and then you release. And you go and do something else. And if you are constantly on the hook, you're not going to last very long. Fish needs water. And if you pull them out of water, they're going to die. If you pull us out of our empathy, out of our bodies, we're going to die. And the earth is going to be very, very lonely. I just watched La La Land. Have anyone seen La La Land? What a wonderful film. I was completely enthralled by this film. I don't want to live in La La Land. I'd love to watch it. I don't want to live there. I don't know if you are the same. So can we be catchers and releasers? Or be caught and released at the same time? And maybe that's the goal in our technological living on this lonely planet. So I'll end with that. It's nothing terribly profound, but it's all I got, my friends. But it's always nice to leave with something. So I want you to leave with a song that's helped me greatly. And I think maybe we could all sing it. Perhaps you know it. The tune is actually to the, what is the tune? I know the tune, but I just don't. Dance, dance, forever you can be. I am the Lord of the dance. The Lord of the dance. Before it was the Lord of the dance, it was a shaker tune. The gift, it is a gift to be simple. And I think perhaps if we could live that just a little better. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, freedom. 'Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right. Isn't that the most beautiful thing? I'll put it on the screen so we can look at screens and we can sing. I was going to use this side. This is a brilliant Gary Larson in the days before television, because we tend to think that we were doing nothing before all this stuff. Like, how did we survive without a cell phone? How did they survive without? They were pretty bored, obviously. Okay. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free. 'Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. Now, the Shakers were great spiritualists, of course, and they danced, and they used this as like a square dancing, basically. So I'll start it off. If you feel confident enough to sing with me, have mercy and do it. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Father Kennedy, for speaking to us tonight. And I'll open up the floor to questions. I'll just ask if you can keep your questions brief, and I'll repeat them through the microphone so that everyone can hear.
Don't use me as your model in terms of brevity. I'm sorry.
So, yeah.
Very.
Another absurdity.
Yeah, do people hear that? That the bigwigs in Silicon Valley don't send their children to schools in which iPads and such are not allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, question.
Another comment. Just recently, today, I heard that the federal government's going to reinstate the prison farms that Harper had gotten rid of. And there was a huge discussion about how beneficial the farms were to those people.
Yep, absolutely. In Jamaica, I spent some time in Jamaica, and I would visit a prison farm, and it was much better than sitting around in a cell.
Well,
Yeah.
and the farms themselves were profitable, and they supplied, like you people do, food.
Yep, and never mind all this benefit
Yeah.
of lowering stress, lowering anger, of working in the land. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. That's so. So what do we do when nature is not? It's pretty boring. I mean, it's not as flash. It's not as much flash and dazzle as virtual reality. We were talking to someone. Somebody sent me this poster for a virtual reality. That says better than reality. Whoa. But it's true. It doesn't catch us in the same way. But that's where attention comes in. If we're mindful, things are. We long for, I think, kind of connection, and to be connected, you have to be patient. And you're not going to become connected if you're not patient and you're not aware of things happening to you. And so, while immediately it may seem boring and dirty and unpleasant, I think if we can get beyond, most people, I think if they get beyond that, I can only say, for example, at our retreat center, many people come, and we have 640 acres of land on which to walk. First of all, they're terrified of silence. It's all in silence. After 3 days, they don't want to go home because they found themselves in the silence. And they're walking in the land in ways they've never walked before. They're out in their cars all the time, and they're experiencing deep spiritual solace just by being in nature silently. So often we don't give ourselves the chance, I think, to get beyond the initial discomfort or the initial, what am I doing here? Or we're doing it with a double agenda. Got to walk my dog. And so you're walking your dog, and the dog's going crazy, and you're scaring off all the wildlife and such. And so it's not a pleasant, you're screaming, dog, come here, and it doesn't become a real experience. It's puppy sitting. Not that you can't do that with your dog, but I mean, if you're screaming after your dog and running after your dog and not, yeah. So I truly believe that all these million years of evolution has created this biophilia, and that we need to be with other species. And when we're not, things go haywire. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Kids these days on their cell phones, and the youth are never going to be able to be connected with nature because they're on their cell phones. And one thing I've been finding, which was surprising to me, was that, and this is just my colloquial observations, that the group for being on their cell phones are people between the ages of like 35 and 60. Those are the ones who in my workshops aren't paying attention to me. They're on their phones. And one theory I have is that, kids these days are growing up with parents who we are aware of these dangers, and there's these limits that kids have that people my age and older, when we got cell phones, we were already adults and no one was going to tell us what to do with it. So it's just kind of a note of hope, and it's something that I've observed that young people, I think they know that this is a dangerous thing, and they're less almost addicted to it than people I've seen who are adults. And one last little comment too is last year I was up north in Laloche, and my job was to try to connect youth with culture and nature are inextricably linked. And I was asking these youth, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with culture in your community? And one young woman, and I'll never forget it, she said, I just want to learn how to smoke fish, but I don't know who to ask. And meanwhile, I'm dealing with people who are working professionals who are saying, kids these days don't care, they're on their cell phones, and we have elders lamenting how kids these days don't care. And I said, the kids just told me what they want. Why are we failing them and not connecting them to what they actually do want intrinsically?
Well said. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Just with all of the information on how important the environment is for psychological and physical health, it's crucial to work to preserve the environment, and everything is kind of under destruction. And as you said, by 2050 there would be more plastic in the oceans than fish. How do we not become discouraged, and how can we, other than things we do in our own lives, kind of work to combat the pattern that we're kind of set on?
I know for sure, well, I believe for sure that we are not a plague on the planet. We do some terrible things, but if we work in cooperation with nature, with the creation, as we're part of, it will respond, we'll respond, and we'll all be happily together. So I honestly don't get too worried. It breaks my heart, which is is a bizarre paradox, I should say, but it saddens me terribly, but I'm not as worried as I once was. I think we have to do much more. We obviously have to do much more and much more quickly. But we have to maintain our joy. If we don't have that hope that you spoke of, what's the point? We're all going to die individually. So what's the difference? This is what I tried to figure out in this. What's the difference between me dying individually and us all dying at the same time? I couldn't quite figure that out. There's something maybe, but how do I live well now? That's all I can worry about. How do I live well now, given what's been given me, and cherish it and love it, and hopefully make it better for people that come next and people in all creation that comes next. But if we give up hope, we've lost already. And so to maintain our joy at all costs, not a flippant joy, but to give Mother Earth that sense of euphoria, to say, wow, they've come back. That translates to something different, I think, for all of us. But your work is wonderful. Maybe you can just in one sentence explain your work, because it's wonderful.
Hi everyone, my name is Janelle. I'm an honors student in psychology, and Dr. Arbuthnot is my supervisor. So I'm doing research on being in contact with the natural environment, and I'm incorporating mindfulness into that scenario. Just the idea is that, yeah, you kind of spoke on it earlier. You had said, people can be physically present within the natural environment, but not psychologically present. So I'm looking to see if engaging in, all of your senses, being mindful while in nature, will impact, all of the existing benefits that research has shown have been produced while being in nature. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Yeah, so it's important, very extremely important work. Yes. Yes. It's a very good question. It's a very, very good. Well, certainly maintaining reverence and honor to the tradition, I think that we have to be creative and see what we can do in terms of liturgy and experiences for people. Because well, it's very sad that if the church being part of creation is somehow disconnected from creation. On our place in Guelph, that's our main focus is how do we get our faith connected to our kind of biological needs, our little biological needs, and I would love to talk to you more about that. Besides celebrating Mass outside, that's one step. But how do we? I think it's a great question. I think as a church we need to talk about that. There are certain churches. I mean, there's a church in Toronto that's built its church on LEED standards, the environmental standards, the highest environmental standards. But we're just beginning. We're just beginning to realize this has to be much more implanted in what is. And Laudato Si, of course, is a great impetus for kind of to launch us into that. Yeah. So I want to thank you very much for your kind attention, your singing, and thank you for coming, and be well, and keep talking. I think it's also important that we keep talking about and thinking about this stuff. That's what philosophers and spiritual directors do. We talk and think and feel. So keep doing all three.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for sharing with us tonight, for encouraging us to engage with the world, and for helping us to see joy in all the different things around us, the absurdities, and also creation as it's meant to be, and our place in it. We are really grateful for you being with us here tonight. I'd just like to remind everybody that there's a seminar happening tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. back in this room, where we can continue the conversation with... Okay, sorry about that. There's going to be a seminar tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. back in this auditorium, and you can continue the conversation with Father Kennedy about his topic, a little bit more of an informal setting. And also, you're all invited to join us for a reception, which will be just outside the doors just now, and you can talk with him personally. But before we go, I'd like to thank Father Kennedy one last time for his talk with us tonight. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.